For this session, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to have our first lightning talks. They will be short and sharp provocation from leadership who are reshaping how we think about data, dignity, and technologies in the human rights ecosystem. This round, it will be about tools. Together, they will offer a single powerful message that says that human rights can only thrive in a world of accelerating change when we innovate with purpose, humility, and courage. So our first thematic area to look at with on this, it's a governing AI for humanity. And our first speaker come from someone at the center of a global governance, that is Undersecretary General Amandeep Gill, the Secretary General's envoy on technology at the UN Office of Digital Digital and Emerging Technologies. He will speak to us about what it means to govern AI for humanity. The floor is over to USG Gill. Thank you. It will be a video address, so we are still sorting out the video. Thank you.
Friends, it's a pleasure to join you today as we celebrate Human Rights Day. Today's discussion comes at an important moment as digital and emerging technologies impact our societies at remarkable speed. These technologies are shaping economies, public institutions, and daily lives in ways that require careful and in-time governance. We see the transformative power of digital and emerging technologies in various sectors. In agriculture, AI models analyze drone imagery to help farmers detect crop diseases and pests in real time. Predictive analytics strengthen disaster response, allowing more accurate early warnings for floods and droughts. And AI-enabled health diagnostics are expanding access to critical care in remote areas, saving lives and advancing health equity. These brief examples show how digital technology can be a force for good and can help advance economic, social, and cultural rights and progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals when these technologies are designed and deployed with humanity and human rights at the center. But we also know the risks that these technologies entail. As the digital space becomes more complex and populated with powerful systems, it also exposes the world to serious challenges of human rights violations. These risks are well documented and are already affecting communities and citizens in every region. Algorithms trained on historically biased data can perpetuate systemic discrimination in hiring, access to social protection, housing, or lending, infringing on the right to equality and equal economic opportunity. Pervasive surveillance technologies can erode the right to privacy and freedom of expression. The widespread use of generative AI to create deepfakes and spread disinformation threatens the very foundations of democratic systems worldwide. And online platforms still remain unsafe for many, exposing vulnerable groups, including women and children, to harassment, exploitation, and inappropriate content. This moment reminds us of a simple truth. In a fast-changing digital world, technology must serve humanity, not the other way around. Technology reflects the choices we make in its design and deployment. Technology magnifies our capacity for good but it also magnifies existing vulnerabilities and areas where institutional capacity is lacking. This is why governance matters. Human rights and innovation do not stand in opposition. They provide the framework that enables trustworthy progress. When human rights principles are embedded throughout the entire life cycle of technologies, from design all the way to decommissioning, as well as in the technical standards underpinning them, they help create digital systems that are safer, more inclusive, and more trustworthy. Whether we are discussing online safety, platform governance, or the use of AI in public services, the protection of human rights and dignity must be the starting point, not an afterthought. And we need global guardrails to ensure technology benefits everyone, everywhere. The United Nations has a unique role to play in this effort. Last year, member states took an important step by adopting the Global Digital Compact. The Compact is the first universal commitment to place human rights at the heart of digital cooperation. Its objective 3 is clear. Digital technologies, including AI, must be safe, trustworthy, and rights-based. And it calls for all actors, from governments to private companies, to put human rights at the center of the digital value chain. As we open this inaugural RightsX Summit, let's move from reflection to action. Building an open, inclusive, and secure digital future will require sustained commitment, but it is within reach. Let's work together to ensure that every innovation strengthens dignity and rights for all people. Thank you.
I think it's time to really thank the USG Gill for reminding us that global governance has to keep pace with global impact, and that the values of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights must remain our North Star. We now shift to our next thematic area, that is on data, dignity, democracy, and peace, rethinking rights in a quantified world. With this, we will then give the floor to Kenneth Cukier. He will really, help us rethink what human dignity means in a measured world, and how data can be a force for both harm and hope. Kenneth, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here. And let's see if the mic can pick me up while I also try to do the impossible, which is move my slides. So on screen right now, you'll see Athens, at least a depiction of Athens. And there's a statue in the front, and you see a shield and a sword. There's other statues there as well, and there's other shields and swords. Sparta was the city of militarism. Athens, philosophy. Yet they felt that to protect their interests, they needed both the shield and the sword. And that has been the metaphor for military equipment from time immemorial. Some technologies favor the offensive, the sword, and other technologies favor the defensive. So in his book on artificial intelligence, no less than Henry Kissinger, the late Henry Kissinger, points out that the trebuchet, of course, is a technology that favors the offensive, yet moats and fortifications are technologies that favor the defense. And the question for us today is, what does AI favor? Does it lean towards one direction or the other? Or is the question more complex than we think? Now, the reason why we're asking this question is because we're petrified about what happened a century ago when the Industrial Revolution met military equipment. Back then, we saw in the trenches of World War I, new technologies that, although they had actually been created prior to World War I, they really found their full flourishing, pun desperately not intended, in terms of not a pun, but it's not intended either, is in the trenches there. The machine gun, of course, the name says it all: the machine and the gun. But of course, you have the tank, you have the submarine, airplane, poison gas. Just to remind ourselves of what this meant, because it's just so shocking. I think it swishes past us in our school child days. At the Battle of the Somme, which was what, 1415, 1914, actually 1915, 1916, right in the winter, so about the time now is beginning. If I recall, yeah, all right. So over 1 million soldiers died in the campaign. It had 100,000 casualties within the first 24 hours. Generals and commanders had no idea what to expect. The frontier, after the 4 months of fighting, the frontier would move 8 kilometers for no military advantage, and the war would continue for another 2 years. And so now we're afraid, well, what happens when, if you have the Industrial Revolution meeting the military weaponry, what happens when the Moore's Law moment of militarism arrives? And we're seeing that in miniature today with lethal autonomous weapon systems, drone swarms, which are coordinated drones. You imagine thousands darkening the skies. They would be armed, ordnance as well as with other weapons. Armed robots, loitering munitions, where you just put it up there, almost like weather balloons, but they're looking with image recognition for a target, and then they swoop in. By the time you hear it, if you're a human being, there's no time to react, but it's not just going for humans, it's going for all material. Cyber attacks, famously, Luke talked about the threats to that earlier, and remote product detonation. We don't even have a term for that, the Hezbollah moment of conflict. So it's very easy to look at the technologies that are moving into militarism and to find despair. Defense tech is a thing, and for those of us who think that it's not such a good thing for human beings to kill others, you have a heavy heart. But there is another way to reframe the issue and to imagine it in terms of how we can apply the technology towards peace, towards the prevention, the mitigation, and the resolving of conflicts, if you will, peace tech. Now, let me take a step back. I don't need to say it to this audience, but I'll remind us that when you add a chip and a network, the internet, and AI to something, you make that thing different. In fact, we know that, but let's really hover on this for a moment. So you had the phone, and then your phone became a cinema, and it became a typewriter, and it became an alarm clock. It became literally anything you want it to be. Your watch used to tell the time. Now it tells you how much time you have left on this earth because it measures your electrocardiogram, measures your blood oxygen level, okay? You have a car, and then you have a self-driving car. That's great, but then you have to redesign the interior of the car because the car does something different now. The windshield matters because you're going to look out the window all the time, but you might not need a windshield wiper anymore. Why? You're not driving. Okay, except to look out. So the cannonball did not have a microprocessor on it, and the howitzer shell is not connected to the internet. But just give it time. You have a drone, and it's going to have a chip in it, already does. It will be connected to the network in different ways. Could be fiber optics, could be electromagnetic spectrum, and it has AI in it. And suddenly when it does that, it's going to be different. It's going to do different things, and it's going to have different possibilities to it. Now, for centuries, we have been trying to create rules of engagement and the laws of war. And international humanitarian law has a noble and proud history. The history dates back several hundred years. If you want to look at it from a larger optic, you'll see that if you're looking at some of these more recent ones that I've notably left one out. I apologize. Here I am, rookie error. Come to Geneva on Human Rights Day and leave out the UDHR 1948, December 10th, but please forgive me. Nevertheless, if you look at, let's just take the Geneva Conventions as one of the bastion of documents. It breaks down to 3 dimensions. Of course, there's 4 in all the protocols, but the 3 are distinction, proportionality, and precaution. Distinction is the most important. It's separating combatants from civilians. And the question I would pose, can you encode the Geneva Conventions into military equipment? I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking it too. It's utopian. Yes, utopia. But I look around and I see in miniature examples of something not quite as grandiose, but still green shoots of optimism that are happening in the domain of peace tech. There are companies that are applying technology for the defensive or for the peaceful purposes, accepting a world of conflict, not simply trying to blow other people up to smithereens. So Covertus is a company based in the Ukraine, founded by two doctors. Their view is they don't want to kill people, they want to save people's lives. So what it does is it is an electronic warfare, which means it sends off electromagnetic pulses when it can identify a Russian drone to sever the connection, if it's a wireless connection, between the operator and the drone, so it gets disabled and it just crashes to the ground, protecting people. Anadar is looking at conflict resolution simulations in terms of if you see a conflict about to happen, and you can see the telltale signs of it, that you can find out what is the strategic intervention you can do to limit the tensions there. B Ventures is a venture capital fund in New York City that is actually financing peace tech and only peace tech companies. The Klutz Prize for Peace Tech is another example of that. DynaSafe was founded in the same city where Alfred Nobel invented dynamite. The name says it all, DynaSafe. It works on demilitarizing weapons. So these are good things, obviously, but they're small stakes things. We're still in the world of the sword and the shield, the offensive and the defensive. Can we go one step further to use these technologies for peace themselves? So what would that look like? What would that mean? Well, could you imagine a world in which drones have software in them that can identify through the geolocation chip that it's an area of the battlefield versus an area of civilians, and therefore doesn't fly into the area of civilians? That it fires only on aggressors, that is proportionate insofar as it can identify what is the reciprocal level of combat, and it matches that, but it doesn't go that way. One of the early Geneva Conventions requires a legitimate surrender to be recognized and accepted. Drones today do not accept surrenders. There's cases of drones accepting surrender. That's great. There's a lot of other cases where you see Russian soldiers actually putting their hands together in prayer before the line goes dark, suggesting that actually they've been killed. And then precaution. Could you imagine a world in which the weapons, if they have image recognition, they don't actually go for the head or the torso, they go for the kneecap. And so you suddenly have a lot of people who are on the ground, hors de combat, if you will, who have been wounded, but who can actually still live. And of course, as we now know because of what's in the news, if you are wounded, you are actually considered under the Geneva Conventions outside of combat, hors de combat, and therefore you should not be, you're not a legitimate target. Will the drone or will the automated robot, the weaponized robot, recognize that that's the case? That's possible to play for. You could imagine a world in which you would have safety drones, protection forces at children's schools in Africa. And so that when militia come to kidnap the kids or worse, that actually a drone hovers up and says, this is a protected area. You have to leave now. We're giving you warning. We are armed. And then it actually shoots them, but in the kneecap, not in any lethal way. So if this fever dream is going to actually be realistic at all, you have to pose the question, who would be managing these drones? Would it be the United Nations, the UN Pro 4? After all, they do have, they are legitimate to fire back if fired upon. Will it be the Red Cross? Oh my God, there's people right now who are turning and they're holding their stomach, I'm sure. International Committee of the Red Cross, we're in the very city of its birth. Or will it be the tech bros running it for their own self-interest? Who knows? Now, I have to say, for Sam Gregory's benefit, I've luckily, earlier, before I sent off these slides, put in the idea that these are all fictitious images of peacekeeping drones, not legitimate. But it poses the question nevertheless. We've long said that there will be dual-use goods in technology, both serving the civilian market as well as the military market. But the more interesting question still is whether we can understand a class of triple-use goods in which they serve the cause of peace. And if that's going to be the case, you could imagine that when Anduril, as they did several days ago, released their Eagle Eye helmet for soldiers, that gives the soldier incredible capability, such as being able to see through objects where other people are by using thermal resonance imaging. That also will actually identify that these people are maybe hors de combat or civilians, or they are trying to surrender and remind them of their obligations for the rules of engagement. So far we've been talking about, in terms of the table stakes of peace, conflict prevention, medical assistance, defensive elements of it, intercepting drones, non-lethal protection. Even if all of what I've said is not feasible, even if it's not going to work, at the very least, the military equipment and the weapons themselves will have sensors in them, will be collecting data. So they'll be able to monitor human rights violations as it's happening, not just simply the world of human rights institutions will not just simply be in a world of having to identify the human rights violations after it's happened and just simply identifying where is the mass graves and counting the bodies. Now we'll be able to potentially be able to identify it. And according with Sam from Witness, we can imagine a cryptographic hash that would give the veracity and the provenance of that data itself. Now, this is surely ridiculous when you consider the fact that even human beings themselves today, even human beings don't respect international humanitarian law and don't respect the Geneva Conventions and don't respect basic elements of proportionality, precaution, and most importantly, distinction. I get that. I read The Economist as well. I am certain I am wrong. I am here to tell you I am definitely wrong. I am wrong. But there's two ways to be wrong. There's two ways to be wrong. One way to be wrong is to be completely wrong, right? The Ptolemy map of the heavens that puts the Earth at the center was wrong. The Earth is not at the center of the solar system. But the Copernican map is wrong too, right? The orbits are not circular, they're elliptical. So one way to be wrong is to be completely wrong. The other way is to be a little bit wrong, and I'll accept that. So I'll be 99%, let me be 99% wrong and accept that there might be 1% plausibility to what I'm saying. This is not a pacifist analysis of the world, just as the pacifists were completely against the League of Nations because it seemed to legitimate war. It just simply gave you had to file your intent to go to war, and then it had a cooling off period where the diplomats here in Geneva would talk. So too, this is not pacifist at all. It accepts the fact that the reality is that there will be a war. But the reason why I'm bringing this forward is because that war is transforming. It's not going to be involving humans anymore over time. It is becoming too complex. The tempo and intensity is becoming too fast, and it is becoming too lethal to leave to humans. So it's going to be machines who are going to be doing this. And so we need to ensure that the machines have some sense of the human rights law that humans have created over time. After all, we've already created it in code, in a form of legal code. We now need to put it into our software code. We can do it. One generation created an institution, another generation has to take the baton and pass it forward. Thanks a lot.
Indeed, you are a deputy editor at The Economist who has explored how information systems shape democracy, conflict, and civic life. Thank you, Kenneth, for bringing the clarity and agency that this moment requires and for reminding us that democracy and data governance are inseparable in the 21st century. With this, we are now moving to our third thematic area, AI for indigenous language preservation. And on this one, we will be listening to Ndapewa Onyothi Nekoto, who is the founder of Naakuluntu, an AI-powered platform designed to safeguard Namibian indigenous languages. Ndapewa, we are honored to have you with us here. The floor is yours, madam.
Good morning. Still morning right now. It's good afternoon. Happy Human Rights Day. Given today is also Namibian Women's Day, I'm honored and proud to be here as a highly talented young Namibian Black woman in this very historical building that has shaped our journey from a colony to an independent nation, or in the words of the UN, a child of international solidarity known as Namibia. We are convened here today at a critical juncture where emerging technology claims to be for all, but AI for all is a myth. Everyone here knows that current systems, methods, and institutions exploit and exclude the previously colonized global majority. 75% of people who do not speak English or any of the UN's languages. This is not just an engineering problem. It's an urgent political and historical crisis. My talk today is not about the usual why we must decolonize AI and data curation, but a blueprint inspired by our lineage, heritage, and ancestors' journey towards our independence to the actual how we must decolonize. Sorry. Next one. Okay. We must move from cosmetic inclusion to radical power distribution. Some, perhaps included seated in this room or online, argue that we just need to add or include more languages to the training dataset. To use a historical analogy just highlighted by our speaker, this is the UN trap. The UN improved on the League of Nations, the initial occupants of this building, by including more nations. But its foundational power structures, like the veto power of the Permanent Security Council members, remain with a few, a growing concern for leaders in the global south. In the context of our cultural artifacts, similarly, being included in AI without control of the data or architectures just perpetuates extraction. The global majority, we must move beyond cosmetic inclusion by the funders in the global north, institutions, anthropologists, and especially big tech, and demand radical power distribution. Therefore, where our cultural artifacts are concerned, simply accepting to be included without demanding structures of how to be included or say in the architectures of the AI and the ownership of data means we're still working within extractive frameworks. In the words of Stephen Bantu Biko, which will remain relevant today, we cannot, in pursuing the aspirations of Black people, operate from a platform that was designed for the oppression of Black people. What we cannot do is exploit, extract, discriminate, marginalize, and dehumanize. Our aspirations are equality, justice, empowerment, self-determination, access, and participation. The platforms, such as the methods used by institutions, and the resulting technologies we should do away with. So what really happens when building AI shifts to who we built with? I had my aha moment 2 years ago during a podcast interview with a friend, Kaja Chmielewski, the co-founder of the Data Nutrition Project, Sanjana Paul at Earth Hacks, Chris at Lanfrica, Error at Niger Volta, and a few others, where I worked on assessing and auditing widely used training data sets and benchmarks for AI. The findings on the biases, harms, and methods of curating data sets, including our own and what we're doing as grassroots, were associated with human rights violations. It nurtured a greater introspection to engineer a practical solution to really what happens when building AI shifts from who we build with, shifts to who we build with, something that was alluded to in the previous plenary. This reality was an operational model where communities are training and machines are learning. The result? Collective benefit, just compensation, improved labor practices and rights, intellectual property, equity, dignity, partnerships, sustainable practices, and importantly, restorative justice. As a country, we consecutively lost 2 of our presidents, our reigning president and our founding father, within a period of 12 months. It was during this period, in this mourning period, that we as a nation were united in death to celebrate the critical role our liberators played to attain our collective human rights. These narratives, methods, and intent remain relevant in our digital rights today. However, in the context of the data during the mourning period, we realized that it produced a total of 410 hours in recorded interviews by more than 60 speakers, sufficient to train an AI model. However, all these narratives and contexts of an African country as told and broadcasted by its people were all in English and archived on digital platforms that restrict access and innovation. In a country with 11 national languages and a 60 to 70% population who do not speak English, neither do they have the means to access on-demand services. I then went back to the concept of Sankofa, that it is not taboo to go back and get what we left behind. Now, building on this legacy of our founding fathers, I drew inspiration, but also during a wonderful time last year when this reminder was enforced by Thandiso Mazwai in her 2024 offering of Sankofa, where we're informed by the past to reimagine how AI is designed. We built Naakuluntu, a human-in-the-loop framework with elders to ground our practices in traditional and cultural values, customary laws, and collectively shape our future as a standard for preservation efforts, building quality language resources and translations in high domains, adding particularities of context across industries and methods to create relevant technologies such as AI, which are truly grounded in who we build with and not why we build it. The motivation was clear. Across Namibia, as we mentioned, 60 to 70% of the population are rural and non-English speaking, facing systemic barriers to information and economic participation. Yet within these communities lie unparalleled reservoirs of knowledge, a declining population of elders, the wisdom of our ages, the architects of our self-determination, and importantly, the multilingual experts able to build and capacitate our languages. But they only make up 7% of the total population. They hold the critical narratives in climate resilience, biodiversity management, and traditional practices. Our initiative, Naakuluntu, bridges this divide through the sovereign data practices to enable local language technology and downstream products to create a replicable model for the global South. Who you build with as human rights flips the extractive model. I think we heard this earlier. Naakuluntu asserts that we as communities or nations from which data is extracted have the ultimate right to govern its entire life cycle. It rests on 3 non-negotiable pillars of consent, which must be fully informed and revocable, ownership, which ensures that community have legal rights and benefits over the data and resulting AI models, and benefit sharing, where tangible value returns through negotiation to the communities from which it is extracted. This flips the extractive model entirely on its head. But pillars and licenses are not enough. We need to legalize communities as enterprises. We must formalize within our desired governance models, be it conservancies or cooperatives or trusts, with a fiduciary obligation in the interests of the communities to ensure we are treated with respect and dignity. By formalizing, we retain dignity in how we're treated. At Naakuluntu, we're working with elders in early retirement and leveraging their domain expertise and rule of law to envision these community enterprises, organizations in the digital age, with a primary objective to transform our collective livelihoods. Affected communities all over the world, whether rural, traditional, or indigenous, experience similar challenges. Poverty, inequality, exclusion, the list is endless. We must move away from being just communities for extraction and exploitation and limit pitfalls of voluntarism into entities of power and platforms in service of our aspirations. To negotiate consent, negotiate ownership, negotiate participation in benefit sharing with legally binding agreements, where it is also not frowned upon to demand compensation for your services and intellectual property. Therefore, formalizing groups and communities as entities within our desired context safeguards our artifacts, guarantees quality, and the required respect and dignity of treatment and livelihoods. So we must reject the monolith. We all have a role to play, myself included, as a researcher scientist that has shaped grassroots organizations previously mentioned. I challenge myself to Sankofa to learn from our founding fathers and implement measures for inclusive participation and access, to assess whether or not we are on track to our collective desired self-determination. For these lessons, I made new choices with Naakuluntu, which positions grassroots with just compensation and explicit concrete goals and strategies to achieve them. With this, we can truly assess whether we are moving forward. It is built on trust, community partnerships, operational frameworks, annotation platforms with keyboards and tools that really understand our languages, and infrastructure and use cases for true participation and access. To the funders, policymakers in this room, funders, you hold the key in the financial vaults. Hopefully with the messages echoed during the plenary, you're now informed to make new choices. Just fund developers and engineers and entrepreneurs like myself, especially women entrepreneurs. Whereas the High Commissioner previously mentioned, we operate in a patriarchy, so we are further marginalized. Eliminate the intermediary. We're very well competent. Innovation has never belonged to one person or one place. Innovation is a shared language for humanity. Please mandate benefit sharing statements and transparency labels for every grant that touches global majority data. Transparency labels are critical intervention to address the black box problem in AI, where datasets are often adequate, where datasets often do not have adequate documentation of their origins, limitations, or risks. Projects like the Data Nutrition Project help to empower communities to communicate informed decisions about datasets, hold industry accountable for data quality and ethics, and shift industry norms towards greater openness and responsibility. You can directly fund the creation and operation of Naakuluntu or community enterprises, or such as data cooperatives, conservancies, and trusts, like ours and others in India, like Kara AI, Niger Voices in Nigeria, to truly transform rural livelihoods and impact to eliminate inequalities. Policymakers, improve migration laws. The visa experience is dehumanizing, hinders and excludes scientific diplomacy, often situated in the global north. This affects our credibility and visibility in critical fields. It took me 200 papers to print motivational or supporting documents to get here. A dehumanizing embassy experience. This is just one of them on Human Rights Day. Every year annually, the AI conference is taking place, and researchers from the global south are often excluded, marginalized, going through the worst of experiences. So we do not become credible in fields like natural language processing or computer vision, where training models on wildlife or building language models are critical in our context. But yeah, that's one. Policymakers, please. To industries, the internet only represents 20% of our population's data. It is not a reliable source for data quality and our inclusion. Without care, using the internet as a representation of our languages only widens inequality and systemizes lack of human dignity. In the spirit of restorative justice, which we believe in as Indigenous and traditional people, you too can improve on your choices. Start investing equally in local technology infrastructure and human-driven efforts with consent and equitable benefits sharing. Stop scraping, stop extracting from communities, stop building for communities, and start building with communities to ensure high-quality data that aligns with best practices, understands our cultures, cultural nuances, and allows us to truly build AI that benefits everyone. The choice is ours. Accelerate the digital divide, or regard community enterprises as equal partners in determining what role they play to shape AI. With the impeding population boom, it's bad business to have a divide. It only guarantees irrelevance in the next 50 to 100 years. We need to move from inclusion to sovereignty for self-determination. So, own your data, own your future. To conclude, the AI crisis for the global majority is not just a crisis of data volume, but a crisis of power. We heard that before. It is the League of Nations reborn. Right now, if you do not take action, this trend will encounter the independence of our people and the very organization that has and is occupying this building. Yet just like how we repurposed this building with the grace of the UN, one thing that has changed was inclusion. And I'm glad that my voice as a Black Namibian woman, and similarly my friends here from South Africa, we did not have this rights 30 to 35 years ago. But I'm honored to be here. But inclusion is not enough. We heard that today. We can take lessons from the analogy provided, and we need to extend beyond inclusion to reclaim ownership. We must own, govern, and benefit from any AI resulting from the data we create, and that is how we foster self-determination. Thank you. So in the words of Wangari Maathai, I cannot do this alone. True friends of Africa will pursue a relationship that is less exploitative and that encourages respect for human rights and the protection of women and children. Thank you. Connect with me and see you out in the foyer. Yeah.
Wow, thank you, Ndapewa. Your work illustrates what decolonized innovation looks like in practice and why inclusion must be designed, not assumed. With this, we are moving to our final lightning talk. Then we will then ask Sam Gregory to come back to the stage. He will speak about the future of citizen journalism and the tools we need to protect truth when truth is under attack. The floor is yours, Sam.
We've had incredible technical success so far for any meeting, so we're encountering our first hiccup.
Just don't jinx it.
Adrian suggested I tell a joke, but I'm actually terrible at jokes. This is actually literally my worst nightmare, is to have to tell a joke in public. So sadly not.
I'm so sorry.
But I will express thanks to the organizers again for an incredible day so far. And I appreciate the opportunity to have a few more minutes up here. What I'm going to try and do is get much more specific on some urgent actions we can be taking right now around the threat to visual truth. So I want to be specific about 4 places where we could be taking action right now, because there is a very genuine risk that we're in right now that we will not be able to believe what we see and hear. And that has fundamental consequences, yes, for human rights, but far more broadly for how we deal with data, with journalism, with public debate. And so as we talk in this framework, human rights activists and documenters are often the canaries in the coal mine for experiencing the harms here, but these consequences are deeply impactful for the rest of our society. So I already talked earlier about what we're seeing in the landscape. You'll recall the animated still photo that showed an event that never happened. Videos that blurred the line between real and false because the detection models didn't work. And videos that were created as as memes that deceived people despite the AI labels. And I want to show another example that I think is interesting and illustrative of this. This is from a protest in Turkey. This is someone in a Pikachu costume at a protest in Turkey. It's real. And then you can see AI used to generate new angles on this, right? That is a much more cinematographic version of the scene. Then folks generated one with Batman and the Joker. They were not present, I can confirm. Then it gets even more confusing. People took the AI-generated images and turned them into AI-generated videos that got shared as real. So we're in an environment of complexity where questions of what is real, what gets turned into real, and proof are already very complex, even in a single event. And as I mentioned earlier, about a third of the cases we encounter in the Deepfakes Rapid Response Force are people dismissing real content using the plausible excuse of the AI alibi, forcing us to preemptively prove reality, including here for war crimes documentation. Now, our work at Witness is grounded in the idea that we can trust what we see and hear if we fight hard enough for it, and if we depend on the local voices of human rights defenders and grassroots journalists who diligently and effectively gather that information. But we're in a moment of shift. We might think of it as a tsunami of AI-driven content that doesn't originate in a fact in the real world. It comes from nowhere, but it becomes a fact in the way we consume it. And I'm not naive about the idea that seeing is believing, right? It's not true, right? We don't just believe everything we see. But I also know that the people we work with at Witness, and also for society at large, that proving what is real does matter. That constant doubt, we all know that feeling, is corrosive. It's exhausting. We need to address those fault lines of trust in a very urgent way. And the reason I'm describing this now, and the reason I wanted to share some ideas on this right now, is that the landscape has even just shifted in the last couple of months. And this will only continue to shift in this direction. And I'm thinking here about tools like Sora from OpenAI and Google's tools like VO that are challenging our ability to have visual evidence and first-hand experience that is trustworthy. And visual evidence and first-hand experience is the backbone of accountability, of law, of human rights documentation, of public debate, and they risk becoming unreliable unless we put in systematic safeguards. And what I want to say here is it's very easy to fixate on the single high-profile deepfakes, the one that seems to shake an election, or the wave of content in a foreign interference campaign, very prominent in the discussions here in Europe. But it's actually the pervasive confusion around everything that comes from having to question constantly an endless kind of context collapse stream of fake videos, in this case of elderly people being arrested in Walmart. They're all fake. There are tens, there are hundreds of these videos that this problem is really about. Because what we're doing here is we're entering a kind of, in the US, we have these funhouse mirrors. You go to a Halloween thing and it's like your body is distorted, you can't see which way is up. And we're kind of entering that kind of funhouse hall of mirrors. And each of those like fabricated body cam clips, each of those seemingly funny clips that is the Walmart grannies, each resurrected public figure, each of those erodes our collective confidence. And I would say that we need to think about this as an epistemic crisis. It's a crisis in whether we have a shared reality. Now, let's talk about solutions. Individual vigilance is not the answer to this. Anyone who tells you, spot these, you're a fool if you don't see them, is going down completely the wrong path. We have to stop telling people that it's on them to spot it. It's unfair, it's unreal, it's wearying, it's not how our brains work. There are so many reasons why that doesn't work, and the technology is improving, right? You can't spot these easily. It's like teaching people to spot forged bills when there's an industrial printer in the corner pumping them out, and you're like, look closely at the $100 bill. It is a bad way of doing that, and it is disempowering to people. Let's not keep doing this. So what can we do about this? And in the US, we have a phrase, and I think it's actually a British phrase. I'm originally from the UK, paddling up Schitt's Creek without a paddle, which means you're going somewhere and you can see what is going wrong, but you don't know what to do and you forgot the paddle. So we need to find our paddle, and we need to find it pretty quickly. So I would suggest there are 4 actions we could be taking now that address this. And they're actions relevant to tech companies, to society and governments, and they matter for our fundamental ability to have a shared reality. that matters to all of us. The first thing is to build resilient infrastructure that assumes we're in a highly synthetic AI environment. There's going to be lots of AI content, but we need to preserve ways to confirm reality. That might mean, as I discussed earlier, watermarking, tamper-evident metadata that reveals a digital recipe of how AI and human mix in something. Instead of watching for the glitches, trying to spot too closely, we can look at the recipe when it matters to us, which probably 99% of the time we don't care, right? We don't care that it's amusing us, and we don't care whether it's AI or human. Now, emerging standards like the C2PA show those layers of AI and human content, and we're fighting to ensure they're widespread, privacy-protecting, accessible, and not weaponizable by malicious governments. And they're being deployed. I'm showing on the screen an example here. The Google Pixel phone, this phone I have in front of me, includes it. It shows whether images are authentic and tracks AI edits while preserving privacy. And Sora 2 videos, those videos of the fake older person in the Walmart, had those when they were created in the app. There was an indication that they were made with AI and how they were created. The problem is tech industry leadership hasn't done enough to make these actually work more broadly. The recent research, and this is from an outlet called The Indicator, showed that they aren't investing enough to make these signals durable, accessible, or consistent across platforms. So we need to be able to understand the mix of AI and human in the world we live in, so we can easily decide for ourselves whether to be worried, delighted, or concerned, and we haven't done that yet. There is legislative effort here, like new laws in the EU and California that provides a path forward to enforce these, potentially, but we need to make sure it's implemented with human rights at the center, privacy protecting, accessible, and actually useful. Detection is part of the solution, but only it works for select high-profile cases, right? They're like sort of emergency sandbags you put down around your critical infrastructure, but they don't work for the rest of us. We get flooded. Detection doesn't work for the rest of us. But more importantly, I think this goes to a very strong strand of thinking about how do these tools play out in the real world and for the global majority, not just a select elite. The tools created for detection don't work in most places in the world. At Witness, we've been working on global benchmarks, detection benchmarks to address this, but even with unlimited resources, detection will probably be no better than about 85 to 90% effective in the real world. So detection alone can't save us. The third thing we need to do alongside robust detection tech is invest in human rights defenders, invest in their capacity to do this work, to do what they do well, but make sure they can strengthen and future-proof their work against a world where every pivotal event spawns 100 realistic variants and every witness or public figure faces 100 synthetic clones. We've got to assume that's the reality. Let's not be naive about it. That's the reality we're going to be in. How do we prepare the world of documentation and frontline journalism for that? And finally, it's now trivially easy to steal people's likenesses. I did it for myself here because I'm allowed to use my own likeness, but most likeness theft is of other people and often without their consent. And often, as we know from deepfakes used in non-consensual sexual images, this is deeply harmful, and individuals have limited control or even awareness until it's too late. So we need stronger legal protections for our likeness while allowing for satire, parody, chosen commercial use. And we need technologies that alert us when we're being cloned. Most of the time, you don't know this is happening until way too late. I'll give an example. This is technically possible. YouTube just launched it on its own platform. We need it for everyone and not limited to one platform. The bottom line, I think here, and I'm going to be a little more pointed in my critique here than just everyone, is that the loss of visual truth and the risk of epistemic fracture is too high to be left to voluntary choices in Silicon Valley. Chasing the #1 app store place, which is what OpenAI just did with the Sora tool, doesn't justify undermining our collective confidence in what we see and hear until when safeguards aren't fully in place. I don't think the stakes could be any higher. And to reiterate what I think a number of us have said in these sessions, this is a crisis of power, not really just technology. When the truth is impossible to verify, the knowledge of the most vulnerable and the people who are historically marginalized in our globe is the first to be dismissed. And as Hannah Arendt warned, a people that no longer can believe anything cannot make up its own mind. And with such people, you can then do what you please. This is a world that I don't think any of us want. and that we could prevent. This is in our scope to prevent this. We still have time to act on this epistemic fracture. We still have options of what we could be doing, but it requires concerted action now. And with that thought, I'd like to hand back to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I now open the floor for questions, both online and in the room. Any questions for our speakers? I see. Yes, please take the floor and introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning. My name is Samuel Emone from an organization called Justice Rapid Response here. It's a bit of a rhetorical question. I wanted to know whether any of the panelists or other organizations have ever considered the fact that these tech companies could self-destruct if the entire population would start distrusting completely the content that they're producing in a sort of systematic manner. And I was wondering whether that question had been thematized, including by them. Thank you.
I think they do worry about it. They worry that people don't want to see a completely AI world. So I think there's a perspective from tech companies. A good example would be a company like TikTok, which is trying to set like parameters around AI content. And they're doing that, I think, because they're worried about a business model, about how much content people want to consume. I also think, and I may be pointing to my fellow panelists' contributions before, that the internet doesn't serve everyone equally as it is, right? And that there is rejection of the platforms that is already happening, right? We've mentioned the ICC example here, but that like there are purposeful choices being made on rejection by communities already, and we need to support that and enable rejection and alternatives as well before the tech companies make the decision to do that. Yeah.
I see two questions in the room. I'll start with, you can, yes, at the back, perhaps let's start with you. The gentleman sitting next to the window, did you raise your hand? Oh, no, okay. All right, then can I then give the floor to you, sir?
Hi, my name is Namon. I work for the BTech project. I have a question regarding the whole sword and the shield approach regarding this particular technology. So, well, wearing my IHL hat, we have this whole idea of technology illegal by design and the technology illegal by use. In this particular situation, we also have to consider who is using that sword or the shield. But in this situation, the sword and the shield, and when it comes to AI, has a mind of its own. And that comes to like autonomous weapon systems and everything. How do we deal with that problem?
It's a really good, it's a really good question. There's no solid answer right now on what to do about it, because the good news is lethal autonomous weapon systems don't really exist, right? They're simply in prototype phases and being made. There is research by a fellow by the name of Ron Arkin at Georgia Tech, who actually a decade and a half ago, published a lot of work funded by the US Air Force on creating morality in autonomous weapon systems. And it's actually very, very good. He's a computer scientist, so it was actually the code of how you would do that. And he's no longer working on it per se, at least not in any way that's open sourced. It might be classified and we wouldn't know it. But and of course, the US government, its rules of engagement are highly open to revision, right? As we know, reading the press. But so one of the elements I should simply say, which was very interesting when I read it, it's quite technical, is that after an engagement, the system would do a post-mortem, would do a sort of review like the human conscience would do the review of what worked, what didn't, and what it could learn from it and what it could get better. That's something that we hadn't really thought about before in AI and in weapon systems, but that's what he had said, again, in a much earlier phase of AI, right? 15 years ago, deep learning was barely a thing. Now we've superseded it.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Online, we don't, yes.
There was one. It was what advice can you give the youth about how they approach this very strange potential future?
So I think any one of you can take the question.
Well, I'm a youth. So awareness, introspection, community. I think just going back to your roots, Sankofa worked for me. And in there I found that often what I was aspiring for is what was set as a standard by the global north, be it that we aspire to work for a big tech, because deep learning is cool, AI is cool. These industries do not exist in our, countries or our region. There's need to lose a part of your norms and values. And that does not really do much in terms of, does not move the needle in the required diversity and of technology to serve all of us. So that was my going back and finding safe spaces where we're really rooted in principles of Ubuntu, which we grew up with, that we all, people united, working together towards a common goal will always remain or emerge victorious. That's the approach we took, where we just bootstrap, work together, and do it ourselves, because clearly no one will. It's not instantly that someone will come in and invest or fund to create solutions that really work with us. So I guess it always begins with us, and we shouldn't lose hope, as difficult as it is developing in our regions. Perseverance has always emerged victorious.
Thank you. I see there's another question on coming from the room, but perhaps before I give you the floor, just in addition, just for information purposes, I just want to let you know that the exhibit, there's a, just to let you know that the ICRC exhibit has a deepfake theme. So just for information purposes. But with this, I will then give you the floor to ask the question. Thanks.
Thank you very much. My name is Vera Pejal. I'm a human rights officer working here, based in Geneva. Based on your answer, I was just thinking, perhaps this is more a rhetorical question, but consumer us, right? How to empower us when AI generated reality is so addictive, and how to empower, how to make sure that people are more connected to the real reality. And because it takes time to create trust and relationship. But my observation is that nowadays it's much more convenient to be attracted to AI and to spend time and also other psychological resources. So perhaps if you have some thoughts on that. Thank you.
I'm not sure who's going to take this. Is it Ndapewa again? Or they can just add, maybe you can take it, and then other speakers can also add things.
I can start this. With us, it was mostly, I had this conversation with architects, because they design our, cities and societies. And what was missing was this element of cultural appreciation, and much has been appropriated. There aren't spaces where we can just connect nature around. It's mostly concrete jungles, and the people who are online and stay addicted online are those who are often detached from these elements of nature that ground us. So I guess how urban design plays a significant role, because it further, separates us from each other. But also, I think for youth, it's different. Context, unemployment, and the need and desires that are, posted online create this world where you aspire, and it really contributes to detaching you to reality. But I think for me, it was always urban spaces that they've become more appropriate than appreciative. And as a result, we've lost sort of identity in these spaces, and that contributes significantly and shapes us.
Thank you. Do you want to add, Sam, perhaps?
Maybe add one note to that is, I don't know that it's necessary whether it's AI-generated content in the social spaces, provided we can think about things like transparency and those elements. It's how much control there is behind the algorithms, the way it's directed, either in aggregate or personalized. And, you know, again, as I was talking about in the keynote earlier, like so many of these are the problems we've inherited from the previous technological generation, the business incentives around social media, the prioritization of attention-based algorithms and rage baiting. So I think we've still got to work on those from a governance and a technology design perspective. And what AI does is accelerates that, because it can make more personalized, a greater volume of content that meets your needs. At the same time, clearly there are ways in which AI is serving people's information needs in ways that it hasn't before, and providing ways to access information in language, in format, in synthesis that are helpful to people. So I think it's less for me about per se AI content. It's how we govern that from a sort of a truth and empirical reality understanding beneath it, and then how do we govern the governance from an algorithmic perspective, and a kind of how do we determine how that curation is happening in a way that doesn't create harm.
This is going to be a little bit impolitic, but I'll go for it. I wouldn't bet against AI, right? It would be like, you know, if we were in the 3rd century and we were going to bet against math. And we're going to say, hey, you're going to be able to, you know, build buildings more than 2 stories. It's going to be great. Like, let's just use math. Like, well, hold on a second, but, you know, we go down this route, suddenly we're going to get the trebuchet, and after that, you're going to get this thing called chemistry, and then you're going to dynamite. Be like, well, chemistry, that's right, but biology, and then you'd be able to get medications. What's that? The AI, a lot of the conversation around AI is from people who perceive themselves to be outsiders to what's happening, and who feel that they are objects to the machine rather than subjects who have agency, as it's been talked about through the morning, and who actually can shape these tools. I wouldn't perceive yourselves as outsiders, but I would reframe the situation in terms of how can we use AI to fulfill our objectives. Because if we just simply try to reject it, it's like trying to reject math. And actually, AI, I'll go a step further, is a glorious thing. Data is the empirical evidence of reality that humans have decided to curate, collect, store, and process. And we can transform the world in a lot of positive ways with it. So let's lean into it.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other question. And with this, I really want to take this opportunity to give thanks to all our lightning speakers for setting such a powerful tone for today's conversation. You managed to take us from global AI governance to the politics of data, to indigenous innovation, and to the defense of civic peace in the post-truth world. This is exactly the multidimensional thinking RightsX was designed to spark.